Greetings. This is Mr. Lutuli from Amplified College. Thanks for joining us in this channel. This channel is called Amplified Bookshelf, as you have noticed. Today we're looking at this particular book that we have produced. This is for multiple choice question. So we are going to do some few multiple choice questions so that we can be able to lead you on what is multiple choice question and what is expected on you. Now, before maybe we do that, let us look at the concept of multiple choice before the chapter that I'm going to deal with is the first chapter of the book. The first chapter of the book, which is projectile motions. So I'll be dealing with these particular questions. So from this one, maybe we should be able to first to look what the exam guideline says, what is expected on us, because the multiple choice questions are the questions that they're testing the knowledge that you have, the definitions, simple knowledge, and then the independent variables and dependent variable. It depends what the examiner wants. But let us look at what projectile motion is all about, which you know as grade 12 student, that the projectile motion is all about things that are being projected. But the few things that you should take note of, you cannot enter exam room without knowing this big term. That term is called projectile. No, the examiner wants you to know whether you understand what is projectiles. So according to the exam guideline, it says explain what is meant by projectile, and that is an object which has been given an initial velocity, then it moves under the influence of gravity. It moves under the influence of gravity. So I need to highlight that one, because when we are marking as markers, we want to see that it is an object that moves under the influence of gravity only. The only is very important, because if you say it's just an object that moves under the influence of gravity, it's open. That's why in a statement, when you're dealing with the projectile motions, you read the statement at the end, they'll say ignore the effects of air friction. Ignore the effects of air friction. Why? They're accommodating this only because it must be an object that is moving under the influence of gravity only. That's the first thing. And then another word that is important is this word, which is more or less the same. This word, free fall. And then the examiner said you must be able to define free fall as a motion during which the only force acting on object is a gravitational force. So free fall and projectile, they're more or less the same. It depends what the examiner says. So now, but you must be able to define free fall as the motion which on which only force the force acting on an object is gravity only. So this again, we need to have this only. But if you just move, because we've seen most of the learners, they are able to define free fall. They will normally say a free fall is when something or an object is moving under the influence of gravity. But if there is no only there, then that thing is out. So in a multiple choice type of question, the examiner can play around with this concept. You can play around with this concept whether you know them. And then the next thing that the examiner would want you to know is to use the equations. So in a multiple choice question, you're not going to have a calculations of equation, but you will play around checking whether you understand the concept of projectile motion. The very important key things that we should know when we talk about a projectile motions, where normally we say if an object is projected upward and then comes that to the point of projection, few things that you should notice that can come in a multiple choice question is that, number one, you know that V at the highest point is 0. V at the highest point is 0. The examiner will play around with this concept and say whether you understand that at the highest point that velocity is 0. And then also, if there are two directions, we normally say that as teachers, that if there are two directions in science, we take one as positive and other one as negative. Normally we take this upward as positive and downward as negative, but it does not prevent you to take negative as upward upward and vice versa. So, but you must know that if there are two directions, then you must take one as positive and other one as negative. Now, the very important, the examiner now in a multiple choice type of question will check whether you know these things. So whatever question that you will pose, we're going to look at it later because we are still doing the background checks here. And then the issue of gravity also. Gravity, G, is always downward, and the value of G is 9.8 meters per second, as you can see. So it's always whether you are in this point, on this point, or this point, or this point, or this point. So some of the people, they think that because now V here is 0, therefore the G also will be 0. So you must know that G, it doesn't matter what the object is doing, or is moving up or is moving down, but G will always be downward. So those are the things that the examiner will play around when it's come to multiple choice, checking whether you understand those basic things. And then also the examiner can check also that you know that the time taken to move up is equal to the time taken going down, you know. And then also the examiner will also can check this, that in a case like I've just deleted the whole thing, but I wanted to emphasize this. Okay, we said here V is equal to 0. We say G is always downward, is 9.8. It's constant, meters per second squared. And then G is acceleration. So the examiner can check whether you understand that G is an acceleration, and then the time taken to reach the highest point is the same time that's taken to reach the point of projection. Again, the examiner also can check whether you understand this thing of initial velocity. The initial velocity for something that is projected upward, it must be greater than 0, and then as it moves up, the velocity decreases. As it moves up, the velocity decreases until it reaches the highest point. The highest point where then we'll say the velocity is 0. Once it's reached this point, the V is 0, but G is still 9.8, and then it will increase. It will increase. When it reaches the point of projected, whatever velocity that it started with, if it started with 5 meters per second, then it's going to reach with 5 meters per second. So the maximum velocity will get it when it returns back. So you must know that if it's something, maybe in a case where the situation is that somebody is standing on a cliff, on a building, and projects something up and comes down like this. We know that V will always be 0, and we know that here the V will be the maximum here, because it's going to increase from here, increase until it reach the ground. And then another situation is other two situations that we've discussed. Being projected up and comes back to the point of projection. So this one is different. It's being projected but does not come to the point of projection. It goes down and it reach a certain point where we'll say it reached the ground. So you must know these things. And then also I was explaining this when it's come to that. All right. And then another thing that according to exam guideline, you should be able or you should be comfortable also with your graphs. You know, as the examiner stated here, you must know your graph. This is a position time graph or displacement time graph, and then your velocity time graph, and then your acceleration time graphs. The relationship that we have between these two graphs, and then the relationships between we have. The very important graph is this one. Velocity time graph. You know why it's important? Because it can gives question to the examiner. Examiner can ask question based on the acceleration time graph, and examiner can ask question based on the velocity time graph, on a displacement time graph. Now, here you must know that the area under the curve is equal to, it gives you displacement time graph. The area under the curve, be it the curve is a triangle, is half base times height, be it the curve is a right angle, length times breadth. That is taken from mathematics. You should be comfortable with that in mathematics. And also here when they ask you in this type of relationship, they say calculate the graph. The graph of a velocity time graph will give you an acceleration. It gives you an acceleration. So the gradient on a velocity time graph, it give you the acceleration. And then here the acceleration, if you calculate the area under the curve of acceleration, will give you velocity. You should be comfortable with the relationship. So the examiner can throw whatever question based on this in a multiple choice question, checking whether you know these things or not. Because multiple choice is all about checking the basics of a concept when it's come to this. That's why I said we must start with the projectile motion. And then now, when you look at this, the examiner said, no, you must be comfortable with an object that is undergoing a free fall, falling object in a graph. There are three graphs that are normally is this one, the situation where something is being projected up and then comes back to the point of projection, or somebody is standing on a cliff, on a building, is projected up and come back. The other one, or is projected downwards now, is just project downward like this. So these are the three situations that we normally deal with. You should be able to draw the velocity time graph on this situation. You draw a velocity time graph on this situation, to draw whatever graph that is being asked. And the question that are based on this one, if it's a velocity time graph, they can ask you to find the gradient. In a way, they're asking you to find an acceleration. If they're asking to find the area under the curve at a certain time, then they're asking you also to find a displacement. So you should be able to play with these things. A normal situation or on a graph, on a velocity time graph, I need to emphasize this also. When we are looking at the velocity time graph, you need, when we are writing your graph, to be able, that's not in a multiple choice question, but it's something that I should emphasize. If it's a velocity time graph, you need to have your variables clearly put, and then their units. And then from there, then you can draw your graph. When you draw your graph, let's say your graph is like this, something that is being projected up, it reached the highest point. This will be our highest point, and then it continues. Oh, sorry, man, my line is broken now. So it continues. We assume that this is same thing. Maybe let me try to redraw it. Let me try to redraw it. If we have a velocity time graph like this, and then we put our units correctly, meters per second. I'm using different colors so that you'll be able to see this. And then you are drawing your graph. Let's say start from 5 meters per second. It continues like this, and then from this point, this will be your highest point, because here you know that the velocity is 0. In the highest point, the velocity is 0. Here you should be, when they ask you to calculate the area under the curve, then you know that here they want a displacement, okay, delta x or delta y, and so on and so on and so on. So these are the things that I thought I should just emphasize first before we move on when it's come to these things. Let me double check. Yeah, so those are the things. Now I believe that with this background, when I lead you to answer this question, because in a multiple choice question we've created this study guide for you to be able to answer these simple questions. It's simple questions that can give you marks. The multiple choice questions in grade 12 exam paper is 20 marks. 20 marks. Remember, in order for you to get that 30%, whether we agree on it or not, you need 45 marks. So you are halfway there if you are able to answer the multiple choice. So now I will be leading you how to answer some of the questions. I'm not going to do all the questions on the study guide, but I'm going to choose 1 or 2, 3 just to emphasize what we've been talking about. Thank you so much. See you in the next video.